Good morning, everybody. My name is Santosh Carvalho. I'm absolutely thrilled to be talking to you this morning on the topic of how to digitally transform your non-for-profit in this era of COVID, and specifically, what are the mindsets and organizational disciplines that set apart the organizations that we at Salesforce have seen be incredibly successful at transformation and those less so. My role involves digital transformation and innovation, guiding our most strategic and important customers on their journey. So I've had a first-hand insight and look into what these techniques, mindsets, and organizational disciplines are. I quickly want to go through the agenda for this morning. It's in 3 parts. It's really simple. It's about 20 minutes of your time. I just want to level set firstly on digital transformation. We're going to use that phrase a lot. It'll be helpful to have a common definition as we go into this. Second, we'll then dive into the real meat of this presentation, the mindsets that I spoke about, things that really the way organizations and executive leaders in particular think about change and how that helps them be successful. And then the core organizational disciplines, another language example for that might be disciplines or muscle groups or techniques or capabilities. Call it what you like, but these are the characteristics of organizations that have been very successful at change, and I'd love to share those with you. To begin with, what is digital transformation? Let's level set on that. I've got a couple of examples for you here in terms of definitions, from an internal perspective at Salesforce and also an external perspective. The key commonality between the two are the things that I've highlighted in blue, and you'll see it's got nothing to do with technology. It's really about what technology can do for the organization. And I think as a technology industry in general, we've done our customers and the industry in general a disservice by using it too loosely. So to focus our conversation and in general to think about transformation, I'd like to look at the things in blue, that of reimagination, reimagining the business or the organization that you work for, or in the words of MIT, fundamentally changing the impact that you're seeking to have. So it's not just a minor tweak, it's quite a comprehensive change. So to put that into perspective, I want to quickly talk about the story of the car, just to illustrate the example of what's different. And the original Ford story, the famous T model example, and the quote that said, you can have it in any color as long as you want it in black. So the focus was on mass production, and then later on, that mass production was really optimized in the 1980s, led to the advent of Lean Six Sigma and Kaizen and other continuous improvement, primarily driven by Toyota. But in terms of the relationship and distribution model, was still primarily through the dealer networks. As a car company, they don't really have to worry about the end customer. Tesla comes along and flips that on its head. And aside from the electrification, which is it's a completely different topic, I'd like to focus on the fact that through digital technology, they're able to directly sell to the consumer. So transformation now for the likes of Toyota and Ford, who have to catch up to this model, has to necessarily involve a complete reinvention and rethinking the business impact, because the old model has really got a limited shelf life of selling through a dealer. So they need to build relationships with you and I, with customers directly in a way they never did before. So they're going to use digital technology to completely transform how they do business. So when we talk about transformation going forward, really, we're talking about complete rewriting of business impact and fundamental change. All of these were important to the not-for-profit sector, and increasingly so because of COVID. And the point that I want to make here is digital transformation is not a new topic. The fact that you've joined this particular live stream suggests to me that this topic is already important to you. And actually what we're seeing in the market is a real big change in the types of questions that we as a technology and transformation partner are getting asked. 2, 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, the question that we got asked primarily, and in my role, I had the pleasure of talking to commercial companies and not-for-profits as well. The primary question was, well, what should our digital transformation strategy be? What might the vision be? What should the experiences be that we want to deliver to our constituents at large? That's changed now. Everyone gets it. Everyone gets they need to do it. They have to change. The fundamental change that now that we're seeing and the questions that we're getting asked now is, how do we digitally transform? Because everyone's tried it in some shape or form. Perhaps not to the extent of fundamental business impact change or reimagining the organization itself, but they've certainly tried. So the focus of what I'm going to share with you around the mindsets and organizational disciplines is how to execute on digital transformation. What sets apart organizations that do incredibly well, and what sets about organizations that are not so successful. That's where we'll move to next. So if the fundamental question is how do you digitally transform, our research has showed one of the key differentiators of success between organizations that have been very successful and those that have struggled a little bit more is executive mindsets. The most common mindset that we have encountered is that of renovate. It's a mindset that 90% of executives and 90% therefore of organizations have that is focused on really optimization and efficiency. A common symptom is organizations that replace old technology about to get to its end of life and bring in shiny new technology and put the label of digital transformation. However, the fundamental processes of engaging with their constituents has not changed. The processes around fundraising, the processes around program management, the underlying, if you like, backbone of the organization is unchanged. It's just a rip and replace of technology. Or in other instances, it's a marginal change in efficiency, a little bit of automation. There's nothing really meeting that definitional requirement of digital transformation that I shared earlier. So that's 90%. It's an understandable mindset. Organizations have to start somewhere, but it is an insufficient one. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got transcend. In the commercial world, those are your disruptors. They're the born digital companies, the Airbnbs, the Ubers of the world. They've really turned an industry upside down. They don't have any legacy. You can come in and really start to ask a completely different question, right? Those organizations are saying, how do I create brand new sources of value? And in legacy organizations, even in not-for-profit, there are individuals who are visionaries who are saying, we can do things slightly differently. We can fundraise differently. We can deliver our programs differently. However, that's a very small pocket of individuals. And the bigger problem is very few people are being, and therefore very few organizations are making this leap from a mindset of renovate into transcend. If the vast majority of organizations are stuck in renovate, and we're seeing that, it's a focus that's really about least amount of risk and a lot of efficiency and rip and replace type of place, what's stopping the people and what's stopping the organizations from making that leap? And it's not for want of lack of ideas. On the left-hand side, you'll see there's new business models available, new offerings, new experiences. But the reason the leap is not being made from renovate to transcend is this trifecta of capabilities that have not been invested in. It's technology. They don't necessarily always have the right technology, but that's only part of the story. They've also really crucially haven't committed to rewiring processes. They haven't said we need to challenge how we go to market. We need to really rethink whether this is the future. That doesn't happen. And most crucially, when new technology is put in around this veneer of digital transformation, certainly there isn't a focus on, are we working in the right way? Do we have the right skills in-house? Have we actually transformed our own operating model in response to the new technology we put in? There is a real alignment and execution gap. So what we suggest now is digital transformations are not really about transcend for the vast majority of organizations who've got legacy. It's not going to happen. It's too difficult because that chasm is so wide. However, there is an enormous amount of value to be gained from evolving, from saying, can we, with all our legacy, with all our history, can we put the constituent in the center of the organization? And that really is where the focus of digital transformation should be. That's where the mindset should be. And this is not just a pithy statement. Where we'll go to next in the presentation is look at what are the disciplines required for putting a constituent in the center of the organization. So now you've seen the question actually that we set out to ask has actually changed. Initially, we said, what does it take or how do you digitally transform? Now that you've seen the mindsets that distinguish successful organizations from not so successful ones, the question is, how do you move from renovate to evolve? So what does that look like? Or put another way, what does an organization that has made that successful transition, digitally transformed, what are the components that really set them apart? No organization, legacy organization, is doing all of these four things really well. What we found when we've taken the best of each organization and we formed really a composite of the perfect transcendental organization, something to aspire to, these are the key disciplines, functional capabilities, muscle groups, call them what you like, that organizations must have to be able to move from renovate to evolve. So let's go through them in turn. The first one's constituent-centric business processes. Another way, more commonly, you'll hear customer centricity. What does that mean in practice? We need to take a slight history detour. Historically, and you go back to the third industrial revolution, the example of Toyota, where really transformation was focused on was in the internal organization. How do we make it as efficient, as optimized as possible to run our organization? And really the way they measured it was on the effort or the ease of doing work for employees. How quickly can we push out a car? How quickly can we produce a product? How quickly can we deliver a service? And actually that mindset from manufacturing and production moved into management speak. and ended up becoming the basis of Lean Six Sigma, Kaizen, continuous improvement, and they still linger to this day. Right? And I hear it in not-for-profits a lot that we really want to make things as efficient internally as possible. No bad thing. But in and of itself, what started to happen, and that's the third industrial revolution approach, was the internet came along. And as I said earlier, the expectations of consumers, of customers kept pushing the boundaries on what was required and asked for an organization in terms of experiences, which has had an impact on not-for-profits as well. So the other dimension to transformation and looking at processes is really how easy is it for your constituent to interact with you, right? Whether it's fundraising again, whether it's a beneficiary through a program, or whether it's even someone on an institutional side in terms of corporate governance and reporting. Whatever process you look like, there's actually two dimensions to be looked at. And this is in and of itself been a very big shift for organizations to try and manage. And there's a tension here, right? There's an obvious tension and a trade-off. So historically, and again, we come back to the history part of it, because organizations have been so busy focusing on themselves internally, efficiency, lean optimization, and you look at the technology investments that organizations made as well, is very internally focused. ERP, for example, consumed a huge element of the budget. Why? Because there was this internal focus, understandably so. So when this other dimension of the constituent or the customer or the outward-facing experience came in, particularly through now this wave of digital, most organizations are in this challenged area where, realistically speaking, still for most of their constituents, and you can take any persona here, you can take a donor, you can take a beneficiary, the ability for them to interact with the organization is still pretty high effort. And the internal process and effort of being able to deliver that service isn't particularly optimized and efficient either. So that mandate hasn't even been fulfilled from the previous industrial revolution. So organizations are in a space and they're left with really a Hobson's choice of saying, okay, you know what we'll do? We'll focus internally and we'll streamline our costs out. We'll make it really, really efficient. And usually that has a cost implication, number of people employed, but that puts pressure on the constituent, right? That compromises the experience there. Historically, this was the trade-off that was being made. It was saying, okay, we can be as lean an organization internally, but the effort's slightly higher. And an example of that is the insurance industry. We're all insurance customers. They have made it as easy as possible internally to process a claim, because that's not really a profit-producing part of the organization. They've made a tacit acknowledgement that they're not going to invest much on that side. So what they've turned around and done is they've made it really hard for us as the customer to try and get a claim process. There's usually a form to fill out. There's usually a call center queue to be a part of, where really the effort is on us to deliver. The other strategy or approach has been to say, this is absolute madness. And quite frankly, the not-for-profit industry has not been able to do this so much because of cost implications. But the for-profit industry has said, we want to absolutely focus on the customer experience, even if that means we throw extra cost and inefficiency internally. Wealth management, I had the pleasure of advising a very large bank on this. Their business model was any single thing a very wealthy individual person needed, they had a dedicated relationship manager. That was part of the brilliant experience that high net worth individual got. Now, they wanted to check their balance, they could probably do it through an app, but because we want to deliver that great experience, call us up, concierge service will do it all for you. And I remember talking to that leader of that function who said, this is really a silly business model, but we persist with it because that's just the nature of how we've, coming back to the mindset, how we've thought about things. And quite frankly, both strategies are in Renovate. But the brilliant thing about where digital transformation is and where digital technology is that trade-off doesn't need to be made anymore. So you only need to look at disruptors to see how they've flipped this entire paradigm on their head. Uber, Airbnb, you can all put it, into this different category. And what they said was, we're not going to look at one or the other. So, the beauty of Uber, and it's often used as an example, we can put the ethical constraints or questions that Uber raises aside, but let's just look at their core model for now. What they've been incredibly successful at is turning around and saying, we're going to make it incredibly easy for you and I, the customer, to book at the tap of our finger. But that was the easy part. Right? Quite frankly, other taxi companies have done that. They've digitized the taxi form. But that would not really make it easy for the taxi driver to go get the customer. The beauty of what they did was single tap for you and I to book a taxi, single tap for the taxi driver to find us. What they haven't done is said, we'll digitize it, make it incredibly easy for us, as in we'll create an app where you can book it at the tap of a finger, but behind the scenes there's a vast body of people, there's a call center, there's a manual processing center to allocate a driver. That's not happening. It's automated. So what they've done, and this is where the transcend model comes in, what they've done is they've kept it low effort for both. So what I'd like to leave you with in terms of this discipline is the focus on transformation has to be on simultaneously reducing effort for both internal staff as well as the constituent. It can't be one or the other, because as you'll see, and as you saw, rather, there was an implication. If you put the effort too heavily on the staff, there's usually a cost implication and efficiency implication, whilst you might deliver great things for your constituent. Likewise, if you pick that other approach of looking at constituents, on focusing on constituent effort only, you then lose that focus of internal staff and vice versa. It's got to be both simultaneously. So the next discipline will look like that's symptomatic of very, very successful organizations in digital transformation or evolved organization is how they align, and they have one team aligned around the constituent. It's a different operating model. And most organizations are functional. They're functional by design because that's how money is typically split up. And really, this is a legacy that's been around for 70, 80 years. And the organizations tend to have functional direction. So you've got a finance function, you've got an IT function, a risk function, a marketing function, and operation functions, and you've got teams underneath. And eventually you get to the layer that interacts with staff. Now this model is challenged, right? You'll hear, and I'm sure you'll reflect on your own organizations, we're very siloed, we find it difficult to collaborate. So here is a practical example of where it can go badly wrong, the limitations with this model. We worked with a very large humanitarian organization that does both private fundraising as well as institutional donations. One of their large donors who contributes in the hundreds of thousands every year called up the service department or the contact center, support center, whatever you want to call it, and said, I want to make a complaint. And said, I'm really, really displeased with the particular message you put out there. I think it doesn't align with your values and your purpose. I just thought that entire campaign for fundraising was really misplaced. And that service person who recorded that complaint took note. They did exactly the right thing. They said, this is an extremely important person. We apologize, and we'll get someone to call you back and look into it. And that person in the service department said, you know what? Yeah, absolutely fine. We're gonna raise the complaint up to the relevant department. And in fact, even the complaint even got put up to almost to the CEO. I want to say one level below the CEO. It was operationally recorded, and someone actually gave a call back and said, "We apologize. This is unacceptable. It won't happen again." The same day, or later that very day, or the next day, I can't remember the exact timelines on it, the campaign that sent the original message triggered its second wave. So the same message, or a very related message, got sent to the same person again. And lo and behold, this person was so disappointed and so, if I can use stronger language, even disgusted by that message. They said, I'm off. You don't have my support anymore. And that cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. Now, no one did anything wrong. The marketing team ran its campaign as it should have. The fundraising team and the marketing team in concert, I should say. The support or the complaint or the service function did its job as well. They escalated it, they acknowledged the complaint, and they got a resolution there. The problem was they didn't talk to each other. Now, the dream scenario is we've got no silos. We'll kill the silos, we'll all work together, we'll sit around in a huddle and we sing Kumbaya. Unfortunately, the reality is best placed I can see and foresee, this is unlikely to happen. But through digital transformation, a different promise is possible. What is possible is using one view of information, one view of a complaint, one view of a customer or a constituent to actually make the entire organization aware of the context of that problem. So let me give you another parallel example of what's possible. I'll go back to Tesla. This is 6 years ago almost now, maybe 5 years ago. Someone on Twitter complained directly at Elon Musk and said, I see a car parked in front of me in an electric charging bay, well past the point the car's fully charged. This is completely unacceptable. You want people to take up electric cars, but key part of the experience is how you recharge. And I've been sitting here for however long, and that car's in front of me, do something about it. That was day zero. He himself or someone from his social media management team acknowledges it and says, right, day zero, we heard you, we're going to do something about it. 6 days later, they announce a new policy. If you park your car that's fully charged at a certain point, and obviously because of electrification, they know exactly when it's charged, you get a fine. Now, the 6-day turnaround is remarkable, but I don't want to focus on that. What I do want to focus on, think of what it takes to introduce a new policy. Legal have to be involved, pricing have to be involved, marketing needs to be involved to publish and communicate this. And obviously, the technology teams need to be able to get that information of charging and be able to do that. The level of collaboration that happened and its speed that happened, how? They all had the same view of the information. So the moment a tweet came, the moment the tweet came in with this complaint and it got acknowledged, immediately the customer support team actually sent it to product development and marketing and said, FYI, this is a really important thing. And the collaboration kicked off because they saw a single view of that problem in real time. Now, what can happen there is the promise of digital technology is no longer is the face and the ears of the organization suppressed to the first line of control. You're still going to have that, but the ability to get that message up, to be able to understand what's happening in the field and respond to that in real time is much more powerful. And that's much more powerful for simple things like that example that I gave earlier, the true anecdote about losing a large donor. That kind of thing can be mitigated, but it's also about listening and acknowledging what's happening in the field and developing new services, developing new programs by being aware of what's happening. And that can only happen if all functions share the same view of the constituent, a more rounded and more holistic view. The third discipline that we see being successful is a lean technology stack. And this is very straightforward to explain. What do we mean by lean stack? On the left-hand side, I'm going to build up a hypothetical spend of an IT organization or an IT function within an organization. In red, imagine that pyramid or that triangle represents 100 euros, 100 pounds, $100. Right? That's how much, a nominal 100 that they spend. What we observe in legacy organizations is they spend about 70 to 80 on keeping the lights on. Another 10 or 20 if they're lucky in governance, another 10 if they're lucky in innovation. Keeping the lights on, managing upgrades, managing integrations, managing bug fixes, managing incremental changes. Governance is the people, the projects to support, obviously, and the structures to support and manage IT, and innovation, anything breakthrough coming to those experiences that I was talking about. Now, the problem here is when we come back and think about things like new models of experience, new engagement pathways, the business part of the organization goes to IT and says, do it. And the response is, yeah, 3 years, maybe, too difficult, too hard. And I actually want to foster a sense of empathy with the IT organization. It's not because they lack creativity, or it's not because they lack ideas, and it's not because they're not capable. Look at where their money's tied up. Their money's tied on keeping the lights on. They just don't have the bandwidth. And where the money goes, by the way, goes the organizational focus, goes the resource, goes the people. They don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. And why is that? Because historically, when they've gone and engaged in technology solutions, they've done so from a point solution perspective. They'll go and say, this is a great fundraising solution. Let me buy that from XYZ vendor. Oh, this is a great program management solution. Let me go and buy that from XYZ vendor. And this is another solution. The legacy residual estate is such now that to get these systems to work together is incredibly complex. It is risky. That means that the cost of moving away and the complexity of moving has gone away, has gone up rather exponentially. And that model is extremely challenged. So moving to evolve actually means, can we flip that model? And you do so by investing in a platform, not in point solutions, where, yes, you're still going to spend money on technology, but the focus disproportionately is on innovation. The focus is on thinking about those breakthrough changes in the model, thinking about how that fundamental impact can be re-engineered. How do we reduce constituent effort and staff effort together, not on keeping the lights on. That should be done automatically, and the cloud promises a lot of this, and you're still going to spend money on governance. So the takeaway here is those organizations that are successful, their IT structures or their technology structures are disproportionately focused on innovation because they've invested in a platform, not a set of point solutions. The last discipline or muscle group or even capability, as we described, the last of the four that really sets apart the successful organizations is what we at Salesforce call sense and respond, really learning from data. I'm going to use an organization that everyone knows, everyone loves, Amazon, to explain what this means. So Amazon offers the service, Amazon Prime. I'm sure a number of you are a customer. What is not known so much about Amazon Prime is, at least in its early years, it was a huge loss leader. It did not make any money for Amazon. Now, Bezos and company are incredibly intelligent individuals. This was not a decision made lightly. What they did do was they gave away this service in exchange for data. So this business model was, we give you a variety of services through Prime, but we want user data. And they constantly reflected on that data. And one of the things they got from Prime were a lot of people were ordering household items that really they ought to be doing from supermarkets, but for convenience reasons, they found it easier to purchase from Amazon. That was the genesis, and obviously not the sole decision, but that was the genesis for Amazon's launch of Amazon Go, these super convenient supermarkets in large urban centers. Now, the principle here is applicable to all organizations. As the world shifts to digital, a lot of data is getting generated. Data between your constituents and your organization is omnipresent. It's there in your fundraising interactions, it's there in your program interactions. How much of the data is reflected on to think about whether the services are correct, the channels of delivery are appropriate? Is there a test and learn mentality to not necessarily create a brand breakthrough organization like Amazon, but even at a more micro level to be able to reflect the decisions being made in the internal organization on the basis of the plethora of data that you hold? That's the reflection point.